Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't even know where to start. I've been fighting with my son's school for a year. I say fighting, and it hasn't really been fighting. It's just been. I've been trying to get my son an IEP, an individual education plan. Basically, get him into special ed for over a year now. He was on an IEP, and the school said that he tested out of it. Just, oh, he's doing fine now, and just took him off the IEP. Didn't matter what my mom or what my wife and I said, or my mother, who have all been right there, dead center for my son's education. I finally got. Well, let's go back a little bit. Last year, this is a year after they took him off the IEP, they came and said, well, your son is behind. We have to hold him back for a year. Okay, I knew he would be behind. I agreed with that, under the assumption from their promises that by the beginning of next school year, which was August of 2018, that my son would be on an IEP and be part of the special education department. Receiving extra help. That didn't happen. So I filled out a handwritten letter, handed it to the current principal, Mrs. Peterson, in August when we registered for this current school year. Hold on one moment. When we registered for this current school year, forgive my mic, it's just not. And they said that's the first step. That now it'll take 8 weeks of in-class testing. Ooh, we got some lightning and thunder going on. But it'll take 8 weeks of in-class testing. And then we'll be able to get the process really started. 8 weeks went by. Nothing. 16 weeks went by. Nothing. Finally, in January, they said that they submitted the paperwork to the special ed department. And we hear nothing. Then we hear nothing. Finally, we get my son an independent medical diagnosis of autism through the UNM. I forget what exactly it's called, but it's basically their autism clinic, does all their testing for autism. And I take that down to the school 2 weeks ago. Actually, like 2.5 weeks ago now. Because they had told us, if you get this, this will help. This will make it quicker. So we did that. And by this time, I'm done. I'm frustrated. It's been over a year. I finally have a diagnosis, and they're still dragging their heels. Oh, the diagnosis isn't enough. We need the full report before we can start anything. And I'm at the point, well, you've had a year. You should have had your own testing done by now. And I went in 3 times in the course of 2 weeks to find out what the current status of my son's IEP process was, and I got no answers. On the 3rd visit, the principal himself was standing right there in the front office when I walked in. And he refused to speak with me. Now, here's the letter that I have written and emailed to APS, Albuquerque Public Schools, basically to every email I could find on their website, to every email address. I will be reading this tonight. It is the 17th of April, 2019, at tonight's school board meeting. This is Dear APS School Board. I'm writing to express my disappointment and dismay regarding a recent interaction with the new principal of Marie Hughes Elementary School, Mr. Cassius. They switched principals over Christmas break. On the afternoon of April 11th, 2019. A bit of history to explain context. My wife and I have been attempting to get our son, Connor Hudson, evaluated for and attain an IEP for over a year now. We've been trying to work with the school within their policies and procedures. However, after a year of inquiries and waiting, we got our own medical diagnosis of autism through UNM and delivered multiple copies to the school. On April 11th, I visited the main office attempting to inquire about any progress regarding my son's testing and IEP status. Mr. Cassius was standing next to the front desk, seemingly browsing the internet on his phone. I asked about the status, and Mr. Cassius stated that he had done all he was going to do for my son and that anything further wasn't his job and was the responsibility of the special ed department, who I hadn't heard from for the entirety of the last year. I asked him just to make one phone call for my son and see what the status was, and Mr. Cassius refused, stating he wouldn't even make a 5-minute phone call and that it wasn't his job. At this point, I grew frustrated. I told him he was lazy and useless, and I walked out of the office. I then took a 5-minute drive over to the Northwest Diagnostic Center. With just a 5-minute conversation, I was told that they hadn't received any SAT testing information, which is the 8-week process, and that they should have received it by October 5th of 2018. My son, we're going to pause here. My son's name was at the top of their list of students that they had received requests from parents, but hadn't received any testing information. Back to the letter. I had been told by my son's teachers, as well as Mr. Cassius, that the SAT testing had been submitted in January of this year. With this information, I was quite frustrated and honestly felt like both the administration and my son's teachers had been lying to me for months. I then returned to Marie Hughes Elementary. Mr. Cassius hadn't moved an inch, still standing next to the front desk, scrolling through his phone. I asked to speak with him and he flat out refused. I asked for just 5 minutes of his time, and he told me if I didn't leave immediately, that he would call APS police, have me arrested and banned from campus. I'm not trying to be unreasonable. I've waited and worked with Marie Hughes Elementary School for over a year now, trying to get a resolution, but to no avail. I am appalled and concerned that a man who is supposed to be an educator and have my son's best interest in heart is so unfeeling, unsympathetic, and insensitive. I've never known a teacher, principal, or anyone involved in education to show such indifference and detachment when it comes to their students. Is this the type of behavior and the type of man you would want in charge of your child's education? I look forward to your response. Sincerely, me. So, I've submitted that. Well, I emailed that to the board. Again, to every single email address I could find on the APS website. Even if they had nothing to do with the education side of things, like the chief financial officer, I sent it to that one as well. Now, I will say this, that I did get a call from the diagnostic center later that said, well, the reason that we didn't actually see any testing information was because they did submit it, but it was submitted incorrectly. They were supposed to submit it through our electronic system, and they gave us a paper copy. So while the diagnostic center is working down the list of everything in their computer, my son's physical copy is just sitting in a file somewhere, just gathering dust. Again, I'm not even mad now at that point. I mean, I am, but I'm more frustrated that my son's principal, Mr. Cassius, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, would show such cold-heartedness and not even be willing to make a phone call to find out what's going on with my son's IEP process. Anyway, that's going to be it for me, guys. I hope you have a great evening, and I'll check you next time.